Hey, this is Luke Owen with NPDES Training Institute, and today we're going to be talking about the Greenbook. There are a lot of changes that have occurred here lately, and as of January 1st, it's now official. And so I wanted to just cover a few things so that you all know what to expect this coming year and all that. So anyway, if you are watching the video, this video's here and you're watching it because at one time or another you expressed an interest in being certified in Georgia. I want to try to give you the information in a way that's going to help you understand how to use it in the field. And that's really the nature of what we do and what I do. I really work hard at trying to make this a program that people appreciate, number one, because it really does give us really good water quality and the ability to fish and all the wonderful things we like to do in the water, whether it's water skiing and that kind of thing. But also as we're doing that, then understanding that there's some liability out there associated with land disturbing activities and construction sites. And there's no need for it to be a harsh program. You know, if you know what to do, you're doing the right thing out there, you're trying to follow the rules, then we all should be working together, and that's all our take on this. This is my take. I really want people to be able to work together, and because we all want clean water. Of all the people I've trained, I've talked to a lot of people. I've never found one that says they like dirty water. And that shouldn't surprise you. It sure doesn't surprise me. It's just sometimes we disagree on the rules and regulations that govern those types of things. So we need to kind of find out how to use these regulations in a way that's going to benefit our creeks and streams and also protect us as we're involved in a program, construction, that can actually hurt the environment if we're not careful with it when it does rain. Well, the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System has been called the world's most effective environmental law to ever be passed, and I think when you look back on our past, you can't disagree with that. But along the way, we need to know how to apply these rules that are going to protect our water in a way that's going to be most effective. And Georgia's found a really good way about that. We've actually implemented a Greenbook years ago, and as time goes by and as technology advances and we become more efficient and effective with our best management practices, then we tend to want to amend those rules and regulations and the guidances that we use, and it's been real effective so far. So as I share this stuff, the people you need to go to really find out what the regulations are is the EPD and the Georgia Soil Water Conservation Commission, their website, where they actually have the Greenbook and the transition guidance and the new procedures that need to be followed when it comes to adding best management practices to the Greenbook and things like that. And that's what we're going to be talking about here today. When it comes to other changes outside of the Greenbook, the plan review checklists have actually changed as well. We have 3 general permits in Georgia. We have a standalone construction general permit, infrastructure, and common development. The erosion plans that apply to those projects have different considerations. A lot of times the considerations are identical, but there are a few differences. And so the state came out with 3 different plan review checklists, as you can see here. And those are to be used as of January 1st. We have another 5.5 months of using the 5th edition best management practices and that manual, and then also the new Greenbook, the 2016 version that we can go to. And with the little PowerPoint presentation that you're going to get here at the end of this video, I'll give a little more explanation about the transition and what's happened over the last couple of years. So I'll give a little more explanation about what's going on with that. As far as the plan review checklist changes, there's a few that have to do with those 3 different checklists for the 3 different types of general permits, but there was another line item that was added to the checklist that had to do with buffers and variances. And so if they wanted to put a line item in there that asks, is there an encroachment? And if there is an encroachment, is a variance required? So it's a good reminder for the plan reviewers and for the design pros to address buffers and buffer protection on land disturbing activities. So there are some other things that we'll be talking about, but I wanted to kind of end this little video just saying this. As an American, I believe in the legal right to clean water. There's no way that you can look outside of the boundaries of our country and not know that it's a very effective program, and that to have the privilege of being able to go down and fish and swim and water ski and wakeboard in waters that are not highly polluted is a liberty in our country that we can never take for granted. And so there's various pollutants that cause water quality problems. And Georgia's #1 pollutant just happens to be sediment. Today, land disturbing activities related to construction are definitely a problem in urbanized areas. This is the presentation for the changes to the new Greenbook. And for the Level 2 design professionals, I would suggest that you transition over to this as soon as possible just to get used to it. For plan reviewers, for the next 6 months, you have the 5th edition Greenbook to look at, and also the 6th edition that came out in 2014. And this one that came out in 2016. And really the difference between the 2014 and 2016 Greenbook is that they removed the testing standards for some of the BMPs that are most commonly used. The manual contains standards, as this slide shows, and specifications that are followed and practiced in the state of Georgia. And it's a pretty cool thing that Georgia has a well-established Greenbook. Chapter 6 focuses on specifications for planning, design, installation of erosion and sediment control measures. And there's other chapters, though, in here, too, that we're also going to just briefly address. But we will spend the bulk of our time talking about what's going on in Chapter 6. To make a long story short, the Sediment Control Overview Council was established, and they're the ones that make the final decision on what enters the Greenbook and the procedures that are used therein. So they're the ones that basically finalized the most recent version, and it became effective January 1st of this year. In Chapter 1, there were minor revisions that were made that included changing pictures and things like that, just updates. The significant updates really did occur in 2014 to the Greenbook because it had been about 14 years since it had come out. Chapter 2, sediment and erosion control processes, principles, and practices, those were addressed. Again, minor revisions, changed a few pictures, that type of thing. Chapter 3, planning and plans. Well, what they did here is they added low impact development as a section, and it needed to be added. Low impact development addresses the impervious surfaces within an urban area. And to be able to put a little bit of that water back into the ground rather than shoving it down to the bottom of a creek where it scours and causes a lot of erosion and property damage, it's an effort to try to infiltrate. And by doing that, you're removing the pollutants from going down to a creek. Also, there were things that were addressed in the state law. The summary of changes that occurred to Chapter 4 were programs and process by which a city or a county becomes a local issuing authority. A person that's working for a city or a county that has chosen to adopt the state law into the ordinances, they actually enforce the state law on a local level, and they do that a lot of times through local permits. They do have the authority to step on a site wherever there is any kind of land disturbance going on as defined in the Act, and address those things. So that's talked about in that section. Highly recommend you read that. And then sources of assistance and resources. Basically what happened here, a lot of changes. Why? Back in 2000, the internet wasn't such a big deal. It is today. You know, in the 6th edition, it just addresses how the districts, the saltwater conservation districts, the Georgia Saltwater Conservation, the EPD, how those district boundaries have changed. And of course, the economy, when it went south on us back in about 2008. So anyway, these are changes that you can see here and click on to get information that you might need to have. Now, here we are at Chapter 6. This particular slide is just going to summarize what's changed. After this, we're going to actually address each one of these categories. The revisions, I've just thrown up a couple of examples here where sediment barriers, the actual uniform coding symbol of SD1 is not changed, but the Type A, the Type B, the Type C silt fence that we're so familiar with is being addressed here as sensitive and non-sensitive. We'll talk more about that here later. There were absolutely new BMPs that were added. A few of those are represented here as a seep berm and a temporary sediment trap. This one, the removed performance criteria, that again kind of gets into what happened in the past when the 2014 Greenbook came out. There were some folks that didn't quite like what had happened. And so a lot of that stuff was removed. And so we do definitely have a better Greenbook now than we had with the 5th edition. So just testing standards were removed for the most commonly used BMPs. And then along the way, technical details of BMPs, since so many things have changed. More alterations of BMPs like tackifiers. You know, there's 5 different types of tackifiers. Those types of things are addressed in the new Greenbook. And like I say, we'll see what those are. So getting into what the revisions are, there's basically 4 BMPs that were revised. We'll see in each one of these in more detail. But matting and blankets has actually been taken out of the 6th edition Greenbook. And it's been replaced by slope stabilization products. And you could read more about that on page 6-69. Tackifiers and binders. Tackifiers, TB, that uniform code symbol is no longer there. It's been replaced by TAC. Polyacrylamide is no longer a standalone BMP uniform code symbol. You will not see it. And since polyacrylamide is used two different ways, one is a tackifier and then one is a flocculant coagulant, it was split up. And then sediment barriers, like we already mentioned, into sensitive and non-sensitive. So when it comes to the new BMPs that were actually added to the Greenbook, here they are. We had two new vegetative BMPs, referred to here as flocculants, coagulants, and slope stabilization. And then we had others here: surface skimmers, seep berms, temporary sediment traps, turbidity curtains, and tree protection that were added to the 6th edition. The testing standards that were removed from the Greenbook involved check dams, channel stabilization, slope stabilization, tackifiers, sediment barriers, and inlet sediment traps. So talking about matting and blankets, they're now, of course, called slope stabilization products, and basically kind of split it up into two different types of mats and blankets that you can use. So to stabilize a slope, you can use hydraulic erosion control products and rolled erosion control products. In these particular BMPs, you really need to look at the manufacturer's specifications for installation and maintenance of those. When it came to these new BMPs, a lot of technology has come about, and it's really good that Georgia, picked up on that. And so they've addressed that by making sure that there's a lot of different variations of some of these BMPs that are very commonly used. So tackifiers and binders, again, that uniform code symbol was removed and replaced with tackifiers. The new Greenbook, 2016 Greenbook, actually has added 5 different types of tackifiers, TAC 1 through TAC 5, and we'll talk about those in a little more detail here. Synthetic polymers are addressed as TAC 1, organic polymers is TAC 2. The practice is intended for direct soil surface application to sites where you need to establish vegetation in a pretty timely fashion. It may not be feasible or where vegetation cover is absent or inadequate. Such areas include construction areas where plant residues are inadequate to protect the soil surface and where land disturbing activities prevent the establishment or maintenance of vegetated cover. When it comes to maintaining these 5 different variations of tackifiers, the Greenbook states that the tackified areas, need to be checked after every rain event. And that's absolutely true with the experience that we have here with tackifiers. Of course, rain can maybe get underneath an area that was treated and cause some problems. So you just want to make sure that you're staying on top of it. And then periodically inspect them. People walk on them. As you put a tackifier on the soil, if they're disturbed, then that can create some problems if it rains. Just, reapply the polymer every now and then as you need it. First variation of tackifiers, type 1. Synthetic polymers, their application rates need to conform to the manufacturer's guidelines like they all do. Anionic forms of PAM, polyacrylamide, is really a big deal. Anionic polyacrylamide is a negatively charged polymer, and it's environmentally safe in the sense that it does not attach itself to fish gills. It does a great job of attaching itself to sediment particles. Of course, polymers can also be used to anchor mulch. So if you use anionic polymers incorrectly, you can still cause some damage. So it's real important that you follow the manufacturer's specification with all of these polymers to make sure that they're not going to cause any damage. Type 2 tackifiers are organic polymers. So you'll see here in the next few that there's a combination of synthetic and organic. Another application is synthetic and organic blends, as already mentioned. Again, only using the anionic form since it's environmentally safe. And make sure you follow the manufacturer specifications for mixing and that kind of thing. The next one, type 4 tackifiers, is organic tackifiers with synthetic fibers. Application rates need to conform to the manufacturer's specifications. Organic material must be derived from natural plant residue. Then type 5 is synthetic and organic blends with synthetic fiber. Very much the same thing. Just want to make sure that you apply it correctly and that it does match the soil type. It can really help keep sediment out of the creek. The next one, PAM, as we already mentioned, polyacrylamide is now part of tackifiers, which we just discussed, and can be found also as a flocculant and coagulant. You can see here on the right-hand side of the slide, you have flocculant and or coagulant, where it actually does remove sediment, suspended sediment from the water and causes it to be a sticky type of product where you can filter it And as you can see here on the left-hand side with that glass, that it settles quickly too. So you're essentially making a floating clay particle into a sticky, heavy sand grain. Sediment barriers, as I mentioned earlier, type A, type B, type C. Type A and B are considered non-sensitive, and type C is considered sensitive. Sensitive barriers, nothing's really changed there, 36 inches wide with wire reinforcement or equivalent. The wire reinforcement is necessary because of the fabric allows almost 3 times the flow rate as a type A silt fence. To have that structure behind it really helps a silt fence stay in good shape. And as you can see with this picture here, the buffer behind there was beautiful. Never got an impact from any discharge, although it was down from a very steep cut and fill slope. Type A silt fence, 36 inches wide filter fabric. You can see here with the stakes, it's on 6-foot centers, no wire reinforcement. And then type B silt fence, it's a smaller silt fence. It's not as tall. As you can see here, only 22 inches wide. This filter fabric allows the same flow rate as a type A silt fence, but it's just smaller. And of course, the application of this would be limited to minor projects or around small building sites. Type B silt fence is very appropriate for use inside of common developments, residential as well as common developments. Floating surface skimmer devices. This has been written into the general permit when it came out, and it is a federal rule. It's not just something Georgia deals with, it's where everybody in the entire country now have to deal with. And there's certain manufacturers of this, but we really have some pretty lenient ways of applying this technology to our construction sites. We just want to make sure that we do install them correctly, and they actually are going to dewater appropriately. There's 2 things you're trying to do here with a floating surface skimmer primarily. You're trying to dewater at a slow pace so that it doesn't cause a lot of a scour and erosion as it leaves the pond. And of course, you're trying to dewater from the surface. And by doing that, the thought is that you're taking cleaner water on top where some of the heavier solids and clay, even if it's had time, has settled to the bottom. So it's a pretty good thing if you can install them and maintain them correctly. We actually have a sediment basin class that we've offered twice, been very, very well received, and it's only getting better and better. We've got one coming up here in March, so we're excited to be able to have that. And it'll really do a great job of teaching you how to install them and how to maintain them, instead of having to walk out there in the middle of a mud bowl where they might even be buried, just how to take care of those in an effective way. And different types of things to consider as you're designing. Seat berms are a new BMP. They're essentially a long sediment basin, and but yet they don't have an outlet where you just discharge directly through one hole orifice. You actually have several places along the way where it's going to seep into the subbase, and that's a great thing. That really does eliminate a lot of potential problems when you discharge from just one hole, an outfall from a detention pond, a temporary sediment basin, or a permanent detention pond. So it's a linear control device constructed as a diversion perpendicular to the direction of the runoff. As you can see here at the base of a cut and fill slope, this can surround the construction site. It basically allows the contractor to open up the entire site at one time when you've got this seat berm around it. So when it does rain, it wouldn't leave the site from one place. It would just run off and be captured by the seat berm. The specifications for seat berms, of course, are found in the Greenbook and address the top of the berm and feed, the bottom of the berm elevation, the top of the berm width, the height, the seat pole diameter, and distance from the top of the berm to the seat pole to be placed in accordance with that 2-year 24-hour storm. Sediment traps, SD4s, are a welcome BMP to Georgia's Greenbook. Many people, unfortunately, were installing temporary sediment basins as sediment traps, and there wasn't really any clear guidance on how to do that. And so this basically is a device that you have to be very careful where you put it, because it can definitely overflow pretty rapidly. You don't have any kind of an outfall from this. It just captures the water, and then the design, as we'll see here, 3 basic types of design will allow it to overflow over certain types of structures to help prevent the erosion and kind of control the flow. So for a temporary sediment trap that's SD4-A, limited to small areas, less than an acre. The maximum lifespan is 6 months. And silt fence, straw bales, barriers, and grass filter strips are used to polish the overflow waters that are going to help remove the sediment from the device. With a temporary sediment trap, that's a combination outlet, SD4-B. The combination outlet uses straw bales and silt fence to dewater it. Proper installation and staking of the straw bales and wire backing of the silt fence are required for the materials, resist a 1 foot or more ponded water. The combination straw bale and silt fence outlet is limited to 1 acre of total drainage area and has a lifespan of less than 1 year. So that's a pretty good duration for a device like that, as long as you maintain it, and that's the key. And then this type of device requires a lot of maintenance though. And as I mentioned, all of these BMPs, if you don't maintain them, they're not going to work. And so a developer, the permittee, really does have to go into installing and maintaining BMPs, knowing that it's going to cost a little bit of money, especially with years where you've got a lot of rain. And since we just came out of 2015, we got hammered here in the last 6 months, so it's been a challenge. With SD4-C, the rock outlet relies on filtering through layers of aggregate, rock, and riprap to dewater it. Again, it kind of polishes it. It is the most sturdy of the sediment trap designs and generally requires less maintenance. It can be used for drainage areas up to 5 acres and has a lifespan of up to 1 year. On temporary sediment traps that are outlets, the rock outlet relies on filtering through layers of aggregate, rock, and riprap. It's the most sturdy of all of them. Turbidity curtains, another BMP that's welcome. We didn't really have anything like this, and we certainly needed it. A floating or stake barrier installed within the water. It may also be referred to as a floating boom, a silt barrier, or a silt curtain. It's not to be used as a sediment storage device. Again, there's only certain BMPs that we can use for sediment storage calculations as design professionals. Turbidity curtains installed to minimize the turbidity and silt migration from the work area into a water of the state or U.S. water. So, and of course, that's illegal to discharge pollutants into a water of the U.S. beyond a certain limit. And Georgia has some very strict limits on that. Silt or turbidity is confined to the area within the boundary created by the installation. So any suspended particles and things that want to get away are going to be kept back in closer to the site because of the curtain. It's a great BMP. Here's a little more detail about it that you can find in the Green Book. And then tree protection, that's another BMP we really needed to have, and gives specific directions on how to install and maintain these good or best management practices to protect trees and tree save areas. Okay, last but not least, we actually have a new procedure. It's a brand new procedure on using alternative best management practices. The 5th edition Green Book really didn't have a great way of dealing with it. But yet the 6th edition that came out in 2014 was pretty good. People had to, for the most commonly used BMPs, they were going to have to get them tested before they could be used and really prove that they were going to do their job. We don't really have that type of rigorous test, but we have some pretty serious tests here for being able to add a best management practice onto the qualified products list in Georgia. So as it mentions here, you can kind of read the text here a little bit. I've made copies here of what Appendix A2 looks like. Highly recommend that everybody read this, especially if you're a design pro that wants to put in new BMPs. So each of the NPDES general permits, and of course we have 3 in Georgia that authorize the discharge of stormwater that would use BMPs that are not listed in the manual, have to follow a certain procedure to be able to add BMPs consistently to their projects. The use of alternative BMPs whose performance has been documented to be equivalent to or superior to conventional BMPs as certified by a design pro may be allowed if you follow the procedure. So what is that procedure? Well, the first thing you need to do is have a 1-page summary that details why the alternative BMP is equivalent or superior to the conventional BMPs found in the Green Book. The second step, documentation, side-by-side testing, alternative BMPs versus conventional BMPs using the appropriate design requirements and specs contained in the manual for erosion and sediment control. And then you need to have proof that the alternative BMP was previously installed and worked. That proof doesn't really have to be a lot of rigorous tests and can be documented with photographs. So I suggest that you contact the Georgia Soil Water Conservation Commission. And then, of course, step 4 is all specs, including the design requirements and the procedures for proper installation and maintenance, need to be identified. And the BMP has to be used on 3 projects where a successful notice of termination has been submitted. And there's a lot more detail, again, in the appendix of the Green Book. At the end of the day, always work at showing your intent to comply with the permit. Always address the design. When it rains a half inch and you do your inspections, be truthful, write down what the deficiencies are, write down whatever violations you might have, whether they're water quality and you discharge beyond your discharge limit. And then when you do that, write down what you're going to do to fix it, and then fix it. And just to prove you did it, then take some pictures. With that, I hope you have a wonderful day. I really appreciate you listening to this. I hope that you've enjoyed it, and if you have any questions at all, hopefully see you sometime in the future.